Thanks for joining us today. Are you wondering what to do with your ex-girlfriend's toothbrush? Well, since you aren't going on a date, stay home and clean your AR. So more than likely, you haven't spent any time cleaning that AR. Let's talk about that today. Let's show you some tips and tricks and some chemicals and a few things that you need to inspect during that cleaning process. So first, let's always make certain that the rifle is clear. Remove that flag, and we're going to separate the upper and lower receiver. Now, our setup here, we're going to actually keep the pivot pin in place and work the gun on the bench itself. So, after that, you're going to remove your charging handle and your bolt carrier. And I suggest that you wipe both of those down first. Now, the disassembly process on the bolt carrier is pretty easy and pretty quick. But once you get that initial wipe down, the first thing that I suggest that you look at is going to be the nose of the gas key. If that's deformed, well, guess what? Trash it. The second thing to look at, the gas key bolts. Make sure they're properly staked, and if they are, you're probably not going to find that those bolts have backed out. But they will if it's not staked correctly. Be certain that you inspect it, and if those are backed out, throw it to the side. Now, removing the firing pin is as simple as removing the key. Rotate it up, drop the firing pin out, push the bolt in, rotate the cam pin, drop it out, and then pull the bolt out forward. Now the second thing that you want to start inspecting, of course, bolt and cam pin. Now the cam pin can deform. Make certain that you look around the entire circumference of the cam pin to look for any deformation. And of course, on the bolt itself, where the cam pin hole is, make certain that you inspect that as well. It's a pretty common thing for the cam pin and the bolt to separate in this area. And sometimes you won't even know it when the gun's running until you pull it apart. Here's a good example. This is one that we pulled apart not too long ago after some durability testing. And of course, some of the stuff that I really enjoy doing is breaking parts. This is what over-gassing a carbine will do for you. Now, that firing pin, wipe it down. Make certain that you inspect it as well. Firing pins are known to fail on ARs, and of course, when it does fail, it doesn't necessarily show itself in the functionality of the gun. When you pull it apart and it becomes two pieces, well, this is a good example of that. This is a 6,000 plus round firing pin. Again, replace it. Now there's a lot of aftermarket components out there, titanium being one of the best, but no matter what you choose, make certain that when you clean it, you inspect it and look for any deformation or any breakage. Moving on from that, disassembling the bolt. What I would suggest, using your firing pin, is press down on the back side, push the disassembly pin out, and then you're going to inspect the bolt claw, that part that actually pulls the round out from the chamber, and make certain that your donut and your spring are in good shape. This is a great time to clean the bolt. Using an aerosol is a great tool. One of the things that has really helped us here is using an aerosol type spray. Now, there's a number of those that are out there in the market. I suggest that you use something that's a gun scrubber type that also has a slight ammonia content. We'll get to that in a minute. Once that's done, let's start thinking about cleaning this barrel. Now, thank God for bore snakes. Those have been a godsend, and they are super, super quick for getting the job done. The weighted end goes from the chamber, always clean from the chamber to the muzzle, and just do a simple pull through. Add a little bit of gun scrubber, some of that chemical, to the fabric part of the bore snake, and run that through 3 or 4 times. Now, if you've really put a lot of rounds on this gun, what I'm going to suggest that you do next is cap the bore and spray it with a decoppering solution. Decoppering, you're going to think about as when accuracy goes away, it's usually because you've got an excessive amount of copper building up on the rifling. So 5.56 and 2.23 aren't really known to copper foul, but your higher BC projectiles like 6 arc and 22 arc that have more surface area against the rifling will copper foul exponentially higher. Now, the way that you resolve that issue is plug the bore and use a decoppering compound. usually something with a higher ammonia content, and trust me, your brain cells will thank you. Do it outside or in an open area, especially not in a studio. Makes everybody miserable. But here's the thing. Whenever you use a decoppering compound or a decoppering liquid, that ammonia is really going to strip all the lubricants off the inside of that bore. Now, even a stainless barrel will pit and rust. It's just part of it. Anything that has a carbon content to the material will eventually corrode. So after you do this, after you decopper a barrel, make certain that you're running another patch of some type of gun oil. And strangely enough, I'm going to suggest something to you that you're going to think is absolutely insane. The 3-in-1 machine oil is fantastic. You're looking for something that has a really good cling property, something that creates a nice barrier layer between moisture and the material. 3-in-1 oil works fantastic for that. I actually use it to lubricate all of my firearms, and we use that during the manufacturing process here at Rise Armament. So once you run that first patch that has your decoppering compound on it, you need to let that sit for 2 to 3 minutes, then run another patch and make sure that it's wet. Whenever you finally get a patch that has no blue or dark blue color to it, that tells you that the coppering has been removed from the bore. Continue to run those patches until you do get a very clean patch out the end of the muzzle. So let's talk about the lower receiver. Lower receiver is just as important, but it's not going to be nearly as filthy or difficult to clean. Of course, again, an aerosol gun scrubber works really good. Now, ARs, aluminum, often anodized. Do yourself a favor, don't use anything that has a super high ammonia content on this. This will strip the anodize off of the receiver. Don't do that. You still want your gun to look good, and you still want it to have that protective surface that anodizing provides. Now, oftentimes you're going to find a lot of carbon content and particulate matter that's fallen back into that trigger pocket. Using an aerosol absolutely is an easy way. Spray it down into the trigger pocket and let it run out until it's clean. I'm also going to suggest that you remove your buffer and buffer spring. Give those a wipe down too, because you are going to get some particulate matter back in there as well. Might as well make it all clean. So let's reassemble this bolt carrier group, and I'll show you something to look for after you get it back together. Reinstall the extractor. Insert the bolt with the extractor facing the shooter's right, and you'll notice it will line up with the hole. Insert your cam pin, rotate it so that the firing pin can be inserted. And then once the firing pin is inserted, you can reinstall the pin. All right, so with the bolt forward in its most forward position with the cam pin all the way forward in the cam pin slot, set the bolt on the table. You want the rings on the bolt to be able to support the weight of the bolt carrier. If the rings are extremely worn, you'll notice that the bolt carrier will begin to sink down on top of the bolt. That's no bueno. You need to replace those rings. And make sure whenever you're installing those rings, you roll them into place and you make certain that the gaps are not aligned. You want those to be 30 degrees or so from each other. So there's just a few points that you want to lubricate before you put the bolt carrier back into the gun. Of course, the locking lugs on the bolt, that doesn't hurt. A drop of oil on the inside where the rings run on the inside of the bolt carrier. And of course, a small amount of film oil on the top where the gas key interfaces with the charging handle. On the lower receiver, I'm going to suggest that you put a drop of oil on the sear surface, put a drop of oil on both the trigger pin and the hammer pin, and then put a drop of oil on the selector drum. That's about all you're going to have for lubrication on the lower receiver. Then what you're going to do is reinstall the charging handle. Easy enough. And with the bolt forward, reinstall the bolt carrier. Close those down. Mate your upper and lower together. And then I'm going to tell you to do a function test. That function test is pretty critical. Now, what you want to make certain happens is when it's on safe, the rifle is safe. So you know that the hammer is back once the bolt gets cycled. So with the safety on, I'm going to pull the trigger. No snap. That's exactly what you want. Now, rotate off safe, pull the trigger, and pin the trigger bow to the rear. You hear that snap, which is good. So cycle the bolt, let it go forward, listen for the trigger to reset, which is a nice audible click. Rotate back over to safe, pull the trigger, make certain it doesn't go snap, then rotate back over, and you're ready to go. Another part of the function test is going to be to insert an empty magazine. Cycle the bolt back, and what should happen, ideally, is the bolt should be held open on the bolt hold open. Thanks for spending your time cleaning your AR with us today. Why don't you go get it dirty again? Check us out on risearmament.com. If you've got any suggestions, leave us a note in the comments. And of course, click like and subscribe.